In the 17th century, if you wanted to feel inadequate, you just had to look at the Dutch Republic. While the rest of Europe was busy with plagues and religious hysterics, the Dutch were inventing global capitalism. They had more merchant ships than England, France, Spain, and Portugal combined. Their art was moody and magnificent, their science was groundbreaking, and their banks in Amsterdam basically held the world's pocket money. They were powered by herring, windmills, and a spectacular level of self-confidence. At the heart of it all was the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, which sounds like a friendly neighborhood trading firm. Except this firm could wage war, sign treaties, and mint its own currency. It was less of a company and more of a heavily armed, profit-obsessed nation-state with a stock ticker. For a glorious moment, it looked like this tiny, waterlogged corner of Europe had found the cheat code to history. Spoiler alert, they hadn't. Here's the fundamental, almost comically obvious problem with the Dutch Empire. It was Dutch. The entire republic in its golden age had a population of about 1.5 million people. France, meanwhile, was sitting on around 20 million. England had over 5 million. The Dutch were trying to run a global empire with the population of a single large modern city. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It meant every sailor lost in a storm, every soldier who died of scurvy in Batavia was a catastrophic loss. They couldn't afford wars of attrition because they'd run out of people before their enemies ran out of ammunition. Their rivals could lose an army and just raise another one. If the Dutch lost an army, they had to check if there were enough cousins left to man the fishing boats. This demographic time bomb ticking under their empire of spices and silk meant their entire global project was breathtakingly fragile. They were a glass cannon, capable of incredible feats, but one solid hit away from shattering completely. The VOC was a masterpiece of corporate engineering and a terrible idea for national stability. For a while, it generated profits that would make a modern tech billionaire blush, holding a complete monopoly on the insanely lucrative spice trade. Nutmeg was literally worth more than its weight in gold, and the VOC controlled nearly all of it. They achieved this not through savvy business deals, but through what could be politely called aggressive negotiations involving warships and cannons, most notably in the Banda Islands. But here's the thing about a company that's also a government. It gets lazy. By the 18th century, the VOC was a bloated, corrupt bureaucracy. Officials in Asia were getting rich through smuggling and private deals, while the company itself was sinking into debt. Its accounting was so deliberately obscure that nobody really knew if it was making or losing money until it was too late. The company that built the empire became a millstone around the nation's neck, a perfect example of what happens when you let quarterly reports dictate foreign policy. You can't talk about Dutch decline without mentioning tulip mania. And while it didn't bankrupt the country, that's a myth, it was a perfect snapshot of their economic psychology. For a few years in the 1630s, people were trading futures contracts on tulip bulbs. Not the flowers, the bulbs. Dirty, onion-looking things that might, one day, become a pretty flower. Some rare bulbs were allegedly traded for the price of a large townhouse in Amsterdam. The whole market was built on the greater fool theory, the idea that no matter what ridiculous price you pay, a greater fool will come along to buy it for more. Then, in February 1637, the music stopped. Everyone tried to sell at once, and there were no buyers. The market imploded. The real damage wasn't financial. It was psychological. It exposed a culture of high-risk, speculative mania that prioritized fleeting paper profits over sustainable long-term industry. While their rivals, the English, were building the foundations of an industrial revolution, the Dutch were busy learning that a flower bulb is, in fact, just a flower bulb. The Dutch and English were natural rivals. They were both Protestant, seafaring, trade-obsessed nations, which meant they were destined to beak each other senseless over shipping lanes. 4 separate Anglo-Dutch wars were fought across the 17th century. These weren't elegant skirmishes. They were brutal, sprawling naval brawls. The Dutch had brilliant admirals like Michiel de Ruyter, who famously sailed up the Medway and burned the English fleet at anchor. It was a national humiliation for England, the equivalent of someone stealing your car and leaving it on blocks in your own driveway. But the English just kept coming. They had more people, more money from a more diversified economy, and a government more focused on naval power than on protecting a specific company's spice monopoly. Each war bled the Dutch Republic of sailors, ships, and treasure they couldn't easily replace. The English could take the hits and rebuild. The Dutch were winning battles, but slowly and surely losing the war of resources. They were being methodically ground down by a bigger, more stubborn opponent. If the 17th century was a party, 1672 was the year the house burned down with everyone inside. The Dutch call it the rampjaar, the disaster year, because after decades of annoying basically everyone, their neighbors decided to coordinate. France invaded by land, England invaded by sea. Oh, and just for fun, the prince-bishops of Munster and Cologne also joined in. It was a 4-pronged assault on a country that was mostly busy counting its money. The French army, led by Louis XIV himself, just rolled over the Netherlands' land defenses. Panic ensued. The government collapsed. The Dutch people, in a moment of rational calm, decided to blame and then lynch their leading politicians, the De Witt brothers. Their only saving grace was a uniquely Dutch defense mechanism: they opened the dikes. They intentionally flooded huge swaths of their own country to halt the French advance. It was a desperate, brilliant, and ruinously expensive move. They saved their country, but they bankrupted it in the process. The Golden Age was officially over, drowned in muddy water. The 18th century for the Dutch was a long, slow fade. After the rampjaar, they were a second-rate power, deeply in debt and politically fractured. They had to watch as Great Britain, their old punching bag, became the world's dominant naval and colonial power. The British learned from the Dutch model of finance, then scaled it up with a population and industrial base the Netherlands could only dream of. The Dutch elite became conservative and risk-averse, content to be Europe's bankers rather than its innovators. Then came the French Revolution and Napoleon, who had a habit of ending things. The Netherlands was invaded again, turned into a puppet state called the Batavian Republic, and Napoleon even made his brother Louis the King of Holland for a bit. During this time, the British, who were at war with France, did the sensible thing and just took over most of the Dutch colonies, from South Africa to parts of Indonesia. By the time the Napoleonic Wars ended, the Dutch got some of their colonies back, but the empire was a shadow. The VOC was formally dissolved in 1799. The grand globe-spanning project ended not with a bang, but with a mountain of paperwork and a French occupation. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!